Here is what is referred to as the Green Line, what was the border of Israel between, it's the armistice line from 1948 and, between 1948 and 1967. This was only the area, Israel, without the West Bank. On the map, all of the brown areas are Palestinian communities. The darkest brown are the built up, Palestinian cities and villages. The shades of brown are areas A and B, and you know that the Oslo Accords divided the West Bank into areas of Palestinian jurisdiction and Israeli control. You're familiar with that. So the darkest brown is Area A. In Area A, to my mind, Area A doesn't mean anything anymore, because originally Area A was where the Palestinian Authority has security control, as opposed to areas B and C where Israel has security control. And then B was a division. Palestinians had civil control, and Israel had security control. So, if we take the two relevant issues for us, where can Israel arrest people, and where does Israel give a permit to build a house? Theoretically, Israel can only arrest people in areas B and C, and only gives permits, only controls issues like planning, civil issues in Area C. In fact, Israel is also arresting people in Area A now, so for that reason, A and B is not so relevant. So what's important in terms of the R issues, if a Palestinian wants to build a house in areas A and B, they go to the Palestinian Authority and ask for the permit. And the same with the school system and, garbage collection and, those sorts of things. So that's this medium brown and beige on the map are those areas where Palestinians have civil control. All of the white and blue are Area C, and that's about 60% of the West Bank. And you see that it's quite, what some people call a Swiss cheese, right? You have pockets of Palestinian civil control, but all of the main roadways and a lot of the land in between are under complete Israeli control. And then the blue on the map are settlement areas. The darkest blue are the physical, what you actually would see. The built-up area of the settlements is the darkest blue. That actually is only about 1% of the West Bank is actually settlements. It's still significant, again, because it's scattered throughout the West Bank, quite close to Palestinian communities, disrupting the continuity of Palestinian areas, but the actual land of the settlements is only 1%. But as you see, settlements are holding much larger tracts of land. You have the medium blue. Here you see it most clearly, the Ma'ale Adumim settlement, which you see on the hilltop, as you're driving south, one of the largest settlements. So this is Ma'ale Adumim here, but the municipal boundaries, the city limits of Ma'ale Adumim, it's this whole medium blue area, and it includes, you have an industrial zone and a few other settlements that are adjacent. So in fact, the municipal boundaries of Ma'ale Adumim and the adjacent settlements are extending all the way to Jericho, which is here. Altogether, the municipal boundaries of all of the settlements, it's about 9 times as much as the built-up area, right? So it's something like 8-9% of the West Bank that are settlement jurisdiction, the city limits of the settlements. And these are areas that Palestinians aren't allowed to enter at all without a special permit. And then you have the medium blue on the map, which are the regional councils of the settlements. That altogether is 42% of the West Bank. The light blue and the medium and the dark blue. So 42% of the West Bank that is land being held by settlements, meaning not available to Palestinians. You see it most clearly in the Jordan Valley, where really the entire Jordan Valley has been allocated to the settlements. But basically, it's all of the land reserves in the West Bank. What is not allocated to settlements was basically built up Palestinian areas or cultivated Palestinian farmlands that were registered and owned by Palestinians. Although, as we've seen this week, even in some cases privately owned Palestinian land is no guarantee that it's not going to be taken by settlements. I don't know if you're following in Beit El, which is this community here, this settlement. You had a high court case that has been dragging on for, I think it's about 5 years. 6 buildings that were built on privately owned Palestinian land in the settlement. They were taken to court. The High Court ruled, really had no other way to rule that, and in fact Israel didn't deny, right, and said in fact they're illegal, they were built without permits, but it's a really complicated political issue, so we're not going to demolish them. The High Court ruled that these houses had to be demolished. The state went back to the High Court and said, maybe there's some loophole, or they kept asking for delays and delays. Finally, the High Court was really annoyed, and then said by July 1st, Sunday, the houses have to be demolished. So then, it's one of the first times that you see voices in Israel saying that we should just ignore the High Court. The High Court, although we have a lot of criticisms about some of their rulings, still one of the sort of important democratic institutions in Israel, and even very controversial rulings that have been respected by the court. So on these 5 buildings in Beit El, it's called Ulpana Hill, the area that had to be demolished. People were saying from the right, even people in the government, either will pass a law that bypasses the High Court, or will find some way to ignore it.
Beit El, by the way, is the settlement that's right next to Jalazon refugee camp over where yesterday.
Yeah, here, Jalazon is here. Just this week, the government came up with an agreement with the settlers in these 5 buildings. They're being relocated temporarily they set up mobile homes for them, and then they're building a whole new settlement neighborhood for them. In fact, there'll be 300 houses built instead of these 5 houses. It's interesting. Inside Israel, it was really portrayed as a blow to the settlers, right? The fact that these houses are being demolished, although it's quite clear that the effect is going to be only further entrenching, expanding this settlement and in general the government's commitment to settlements. And the other very striking feature on the landscape, the separation barrier that you see on the map, mostly in red. And here too, the route of the barrier is very closely linked to expansion of settlements. It used to be that was controversial. 7 years ago, when I would say to people, the route is dictated by settlements, they would argue and say, no, the barrier, the fence, is only a security measure, has nothing to do with politics. Today, it's very clear. The initial impetus for building the barrier was security, to keep terrorists out of Israel. But where Israel chose to build it, rather than building it on the border with Israel, the fact that you have all of these incursions into the West Bank along this crazy route is almost always to encircle settlements and even empty lands that are intended for settlement expansion. And that obviously takes a tremendous toll on people, Palestinians living along the route of the barrier, farmers who have lost access or have very difficult access to farmland, and in some cases, even people who are living partially or even entirely surrounded by fences and walls, with all of the hardships that causes. And then the main, I should have started with this, the sort of main legal structures created because of the settlements have created 2 different